Journey Across Jean's Saga, Book 1, Now, Then, to Come. Part 1, Now. Prologue. The echo of water droplets plummeting into the mostly hollow, metallic receptacle brings her out of a deep slumber for a split second before acoustically lulling her back into unconsciousness. In her bunker, where she is lying on her bed, it is cold, but not freezing. Unawares, she shivers and hugs her short, thick arms tight around her broad torso. Then, like using muscle memory, she reaches down and pulls the covers up to her chin, olive-toned and rosy from the cold. As she slides back into unconsciousness, she is aware, again, that she is riding on the back of some strange biodrone. Its hum is so loud that she can barely stand it. So she tells herself, "Tune it out, self." And she does. She is a passenger on this flight, so she has no control over where she's going. It's like she's in prehistoric times. Not that she would know about that part of Earth's history. Like she's flying through a jungle of grass as tall as trees. Like enormous corn stalks that scrape the skies, bristles sticking out like soft spines on a cactus. Her drone is adept at aviation, dodging tree-like, towering dandelions and other botanical monstrosities. Then she begins to hear another noise in the back of her unconsciousness. It's coming from somewhere deep, and it's becoming more and more intense. Tink, tink, tink. What is that sound? Her subconscious echoes to the part of her mind that gives her awareness. Then, suddenly her drone takes a hard turn to the right. She grabs on tight to her airship, almost losing her grip on the carpet-like patch, which she straddles like a mounted horse. Drip, drip, tink. She hears it again, and a memory comes to her thoughts in her mind's eye. She remembers that there had been a tin can, full of dents but unopened, in the yellow box, and that she decided to put it to use a few months before, when the new leak had sprung, before the ground began to freeze. The floor of the underground dwelling is littered with other tin cans and myriad receptacles in a variety of shapes and sizes, upright, some empty, some full to the brim with rust-colored water. The dripping eventually slows to a stop before starting up again. Drip, drip, tink. She keeps the various containers in their respective places to catch the precious drops of water that would eventually come on full force when the ground thaws again. The new tin can made a slightly different noise. She'd been astonished by the fact that the label on the can in question was still intact. Only a few minor abrasions can be seen. The label reads, "Ketchkameri Shuritet Paradichom." Written using linguistic features from an ancient language family, it roughly translates to Ketchkamate style tomato paste. And with no way of looking up Ketchkamedi, there being no books or electronic devices to use, she will probably never know what it means, despite the fact that she can read, a practice that, too, is mostly extinct among the contemporary peoples in the immediate region. Hundreds of reawakenings before, her people marked the new year each reawakening. Centuries before, Ketchkamate was only a 30-minute ride by maglev, magnetic levitation, train from the capital. Before the Great Dying, the small city had had a popular Sunday market that folks would flock to from neighboring areas. Food trucks in blue and gray tarpaulins had dotted the dirt two-track that formed a circle enclosing the market, which popped up on the outskirts of the town. Because public transportation was readily accessible to most, it was easy and fairly inexpensive to travel to the market from the city center, until it wasn't. Even during the winter months, the smoky smell of grilled sausages made from animal flesh had filled the nostrils of the patrons in search of cheap, used clothing and other goods, vases, ashtrays, World War II memorabilia. Those were the typical items that could be found in the flea markets of the time, items that nowadays have to be scavenged from landfills or homes long abandoned, not by choice. Though, present day, for some of the other people that frequented the market, that her people had operated before her entire village was pillaged, and she had to run away. Few, if any, of those people, who aren't exactly her people, are brave enough to cross the thresholds of the ruined dwellings of those who didn't survive the great dying. The label on the can is red, and there is a white silhouette of an animal with horns in the shape of sickles rising up on its hind legs. A beard protrudes from its pointed chin. The can must be 200 or 300 reawakenings old. The contents had gone rancid despite the lack of dents or openings in the metallic container. Gooey, reddish-green, black, pulpy blobs. Putrid juice. Ghastly smell. Don't puke. Keep the can. Discard the rest. The hermetically sealed, slightly pliable yellow box, that is neither metal nor wood, must have helped conserve the fibrous material on which the words and images are emblazoned, but not its contents. The mother had told her to keep that tarto box in a safe place where raiders couldn't find it. Hers and the lives of many generations to come depended on its safekeeping. She never really understood the implication of the mother's warning. She would understand one day. Its contents were invaluable. A time capsule, a glimpse into the forgotten past. The interior of the box is lined with charcoal gray foam that has been cut and molded to hold a handful of smaller items. Besides a can of tomato paste, which seemed like an afterthought based on the other contents, she was desperately hungry those first few days that she was alone, and with no one around to scold her, she opened it only to find rot. Inside the case there was a pair of metallic tongs designed to grasp minute objects using the forefinger and thumb, a clear glass vial with a rubber stopper that holds a single strand of black, crimped hair, several shiny crystal-like discs the size and thickness of a small coin, a shiny obsidian clamshell case that is seemingly unopenable, a paperback novel with the front cover torn off that sits in the center of an empty indent in the shape of a large ring. The ring imprint is about the size of one of those tossing discs used for recreation centuries before. The ring is missing. Drip, drip, tink. The frozen water that had saturated the ground for the past 20 or so days, is melting. Back in the dream vision, she is trying her best to maintain her grip as her legs fly up behind her like a bull rider at a rodeo, a practice that had also been long extinct. As she finally gets back onto her saddle, the drone veers sharply again and crashes into a stalk. She feels in slow motion as her body is thrown, hurtling over the top of the drone, and right as her lower back makes contact with the structure, she opens her eyes and mutters a moaning sound. She springs forward in her makeshift bed of wooden pallets and old pieces of tattered cloth that she'd gleaned from the burned shelters of her pillaged home, what seemed to her like years before. Her short dark hair lies matted on both sides. Indents from the head padding line her lush face. Sleep crusts around the caruncles of her buckwheat brown, almond-shaped eyes. She rubs it out with the tips of her thick fingers and stretches out her arms. A long yawn flows from deep within. Pushing the covers off, she twists to put her feet on the chilly ground and stands up. Almost forgetting, she sits back down on the bed and blindly feels for the markings on the wall. The formidable walls of the bunker are heavily corroded from centuries of exposure to the elements. She reaches for her shank that she'd rigged from an old rusted piece of metal rod that she keeps close to her bed, just in case. Then she scratches a fifth line horizontally through the vertical adjacent lines. She feels with her fingers and counts in her head. Yesternight was 699, plus 1 is 700. But she counts again. No easy task. It takes a few minutes. There are 15 columns and almost 10 complete rows of engraved slashes in groups of 5, etched on the rusted steel wall. The 10th row only has 5 columns. 9 rows times 15 columns plus 5 more groups of 5 slashes. 700 sleeps. 700 sleeps since she started counting. 700 holds since she'd happened upon that ancient, damp, pitch-dark bunker that she has come to call home. Her new home. Her not-so-new home. In the dark, she reaches for one of her almost empty water containers, grabs it by its smooth, cold neck, feels for the opening, and places it under the dripping faucet that leaks from another tiny crack in the steel ceiling. She's careful not to waste one drop. She has become accustomed to moving around in the obscurity of her safe haven without knocking everything over. She doesn't know it, but the bunker once served as a snug temporary shelter for a cramped family of 4, hundreds of reawakenings before. A widowed mother, her widowed sister, and 2 young infants, one of which became bone-sick from the cold dampness of the underground refuge. Bone tuberculosis, they'd called it. And who knows what purpose the bunker had served before that? Before the flying machines threatened to release and then did indeed drop explosives all over the city, destroying homes, bridges, and schools, and more, killing so many, if not directly, indirectly from slow starvation and sickness afterward. Slowly the inhabitants began to rebuild, never really fully recovering before the next bombardment and the next. Then the Great Dying happened, and only a very few survived that, and from that very few, only a small percentage managed to persevere. The bunker is chilly, dark, and dank, but it is hers. It eventually took on new smells, her smells, and even after almost 2 reawakenings, no one has bothered her. She's heard voices nearby before, but she managed to disguise the entrance well enough with old junk and forest debris that no one bothers it, at least no one that she knows of, at least not when she is home. Although she spends most of the time in the dark while inside the bunker, she does have the means to see by fire that she produces by rubbing dry sticks together over wood shavings that she keeps in a dry enough box. She has candles that she transfers the fire to. The mother had taught her how to make candles. That was the main item they traded with. She has to make them herself now. She can't stock up at market like she used to be able to. There is no longer a market. She reserves the candles for the cold days when she can't be outside for long periods of time, when she can't read outside, shaded from the scorching knop. When the scorching knop is too high in the sky, she doesn't dare go outside, even in the shade, without risking the danger of skin burns or heat exhaustion. So she often reads inside the shelter of the bunker. She only has the one book that she rereads over and over again, the book that shouldn't exist. Reading is something that her people had been known for. It had been something of a lost art that never really fully recovered, except among a few people in her community that dabbled in the cryptic craft. She'd heard stories of how many, many reawakenings before, reading was much more widespread, until it wasn't. Until books were banned and then burned. Until those few who could read only read on augmented ocular projections that required a special technology that was long out of use. Or even more scarce, the physical books that managed to live on in spite of the eradication of reading material on paper. Electronic words were more easily controlled. Words on paper were dangerous. She is the only one that she knows who reads. As a matter of fact, she is the only one she knows. At least, the only human person she knows. There are other people, other human people, but they aren't her people. Her people are gone and she is alone. She has no one to talk to except for her bird and ant friends, and they don't talk back. She's always had animal and insect friends, though, even before her people were killed or taken away by the marauders. She goes to the various glass bottles and cans scattered around the bunker, careful not to knock any over. She will need every last drop to make enough potable water before she has to venture down to the river. Even with the thaw, she is running low. No, she will have to get more after all. Scorching knop, she thinks in disappointment. Listening cautiously for any movement up above, she throws on her red cloak, the only one she has, and scurries up the ladder tube with her metallic jug and tote. She will try to get to the river before the scorching hours begin. Knop is slowly rising from the east. Given that she is to the west, she has some time to spare before the treacherous rays reach her side of the river, but she doesn't have very long.